Alright, here's the saw all set up. It comes on its rolling stand. This is from a big box store up in Canada called Canadian Tire. It's for what it is, it's one of the more expensive contractor saws, but the blade guard is ridiculous. It's not really, it's all out of whack. It's just poor stamped steel, or I guess it's casted, but it's still terrible. The table's pretty decent. It's casted. The miter slots are parallel to the blade, and I aligned the blade as accurate as I possibly could, so it cuts square. The fence is actually solid, but like it doesn't wiggle or anything. The whole saw will wiggle before the fence will wiggle, but it's not square. You can lock it down 3 times, and the end can be, a 1/16th or even an 1/8 out of square. So I hate it for that reason. And so we're gonna start cutting this up and build a bigger cabinet, which will also hopefully make it a little more stable, because as it stands right now, it's pretty hard to cut heavy things on, because it wants to slide around and rock around on you. So hopefully adding 100 pounds of weight to a stand will help it in that department. So I'll get cutting up material and we'll come back shortly. This is how I set up all the corners on the entire table. I butted the joints up like this, and I measure the distance of the thickness of the lumber I'm using, and just make a mark here, and then do the same one here, just so I can tell how far the material is. And then I center, or find a rough center of those, and drill pilot holes for both screws on the end that made into this one, screws here that made into this piece in the center, and screws here that made in here. And if you space all your screws accordingly, like these ones are closer inside, whereas these ones are further outside, that way when they come through they all miss. So I'm using 3-inch screws, so I have to be sure of that, because these screws will clear past where the heads of these ones start. So when you drill your pilot holes, you'll see where the alignment is, because if you mess up on your pilot holes, you'll hit the other screw. Right, here's the frame all completed. Everything's been screwed together, everything's nice and level. I went around and measured all the corners, make sure we're even all around. There's one, or the space that's unsupported there between the center, which will be supported by the 3/4 inch plywood sheeting, which will put there, so I avoided putting a stud across there. Just didn't need it, but you could put one on the inside if you wanted, so it wouldn't interfere with the sheeting you put on the outside. That's out by about 1/16th or so, so I'll have to clamp it when I screw the sheeting on, and it'll pull it right back to square. But everything else is dead on. Is exactly 36 inches tall, which means it's going to be 36 3/4 once I sheet the top, or 36 1/2. I don't know exactly how thick. I have some melamine that I'm going to laminate together into a big panel and sheet it on the top, and then I'll use I think just cheap like shop grade birch for the other surfaces. I may put a couple stringers between the lower bed there, the lower platform where the table saw is going to rest, or where the saw is going to rest. I may put a stringer across there just to give it more stability, because I'll be using a laminated panel there. It probably doesn't need it, but lumber's cheap, so why not? And across the top I may put 2 extra stringers, just because I'm not super sold on how, I know melamine isn't going to bend and move too much. Initially I was going to use 3/4 inch MDF and then sheet it with arborite, but I'm trying to keep it simple so that most people can do it, and I have a big melamine shelf kicking around here, so I will cut it up and probably dowel joint all the edges together, and I'll have a nice big sheet to put on top of there, which should be fairly hard wearing and should work well. So next step is going to be sheeting.